Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fourmation Podcast. It's another little landmark episode for us today. It's episode number 30. And we kind of like marking these little landmarks. But of course, as I kind of mentioned last week, the UK at the moment, it's a bit of an exciting time as lockdown continues to ease. So the football continues on our TVs, but I think for people nationwide, anyone now has been able to get their boots on again. And that will include us this weekend as well. Before we get on with the eventual podcast, we like to do these mini intros. And I thought it would be worth us saying we're going to be putting our boots on. You probably won't be able to see this unless we have special requests to see it. But when we're back at uni this weekend, all of us, we will be returning to five-a-side football this coming weekend. Our opponents, if you're watching, then get ready because we're coming for you. Harry, are you looking forward to it after what's been, 3-4 months without it?
I cannot wait, to be honest. I played a bit of football here and there, being back in Southampton. I played a little 7v6 yesterday, but none of it's going to be as competitive as Sunday. And I'm looking forward to playing with you guys once again. We're going to upset the odds and we're going to win, hopefully.
I love the optimism. Yeah, as Harry says it is going to be a big one on Sunday because I believe we're up against a few of our university colleagues, university friends. So, Devon, do you hold similar levels of confidence as Harry?
I think it's just the excitement of actually getting back to some football, and obviously the situation with me being the keeper for them, but then going into the actual coming back to the bigger team, Deportivo, obviously, in a sort of FIFA money style, finding out their tactics from one side and then going back to the other in the Wembley Cup. So, yeah, come on the Deportivo boys.
We love it. And Sam, I think I've seen quite a few tweets over the last couple of weeks as people have been going back to playing five-a-side about just how much rust they've had to shake off and their kind of energy levels being lower than they would like. Do you think that could be an issue for us?
Yes, I think so. And rust, throwing that to the side, we're not a very good team anyway, so it's going to be difficult, but it's good to get back, obviously, and get active again because I think we all need that.
Yeah, you've just put a dampener on all of our optimism there. But
just think, everyone loves an underdog story, so we are the underdogs here.
I'm a realist, not a pessimist.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with that there, but I just thought we'd open up like that because five-a-side is something which can be enjoyed anywhere, and it is something which we are all looking forward to. But we want to focus on football that is watchable on this week's episode because you don't want to hear us talking about what we do on a pitch because, as Sam said, we're not very good. But what we want to focus on is the European Championships. You probably noticed if you clicked on this because that'll be mentioned somewhere in the title. But the excitement for the Euros is building fairly rapidly across the country at the moment, and that's why we wanted to focus on it this week. So, for example, Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher have been arguing about their England squad on Monday Night Football. That made for quite entertaining viewing, and also the sticker album is out as well. So if you haven't got one of these, and I don't know what you're doing, but the sticker album is here. Devon's showing is off to camera there as well.
It's incredible for research on today.
Yeah, I have to agree. But we are very excited for what is going to be the first major tournament in 3 years. But having already gone over the England team a few weeks back, we thought we wanted to look at the tournament as a whole today. So on this week's episode, we're going to discuss how we think the tournament could pan out. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to go through all 6 groups. We're going to decide on the best 2 teams from each one between us. And then we're going to move those teams through into 2 different halves of the draw, dependent on which group they came from. And then eventually we'll kind of come to a final and then hopefully an eventual winner that we think could end up being crowned. But obviously it's all our predictions because it's still a couple of months away. Hopefully it will become clearer once we get going. Before we start with Group A, I should just say a lot of people listening might be thinking, you said you're just going to do the top 2 teams. what about the teams who finished third? Now, of course, we are aware of this, that there will be some teams who finish third and still go through. But to be quite honest, that would just complicate things way too far. We did discuss this beforehand, but we don't want it being a whole, this team plays this team, everything else. We just want to go through the groups and kind of just give our views on it. We might do something more in depth closer to the tournament. I think there's a good chance we will, but just to clarify that, we are aware, but go and blame UEFA for messing up the format of the tournament, because I know that 24 teams is probably a bit too much. Well, that's my opinion, but never mind. This is what we're doing. As I said, I've said too much already. So let's get on with it. We're going to go through every group and kind of go from there. So Group A in Euro 2020 is made up of 4 teams, as each group is. Those 4 teams are Italy, Switzerland, Turkey, and Wales. When I look at those 4 teams, Sam, I think Italy probably stand out to me out of the 4. Would you agree with that they're the team who will be expected to top it?
Yeah, it's maybe the debate for this group is probably more in who will finish second and third, because I think Italy are definitely the clear favourites for this one. Roberto Mancini in charge of them, obviously. He's got some pedigree in the game and they've got a lot of talent. Obviously, they've struggled a little bit on an international level in recent other tournaments, but some of the attacking talent they've got in particular, which is what I highlighted when I was doing my research, Ciro Immobile, Lorenzo Insigne, Andrea Belotti, they're all real threats for when they get into the last stages. And of course, obviously at the back as well, Chiellini, who's such a brilliant defender, he's so experienced, and Gianluigi Donnarumma in net, who's still only 22, unbelievably. He's been in the game that long already, played over 200 Serie A games for AC Milan in goal already. Only conceded 220 in those 206 games as well. So they've got a lot of good players all over the park. And like I say, with Mancini in charge, they're well drilled, great defensively and great going forward as well. So I would have them as the biggest threat in that group and one of the threats for later on in the tournament as well.
Yeah, and Sam mentions there that the likes of Chiellini and Bonucci are still forming part of that defence, who've been there for so long and are so experienced. But Devon, how important do you think it's been to Italy to kind of blood that youth through in the likes of Donnarumma as well, to make sure that there is a balance there and it's not kind of too old? Because I think that has been something that has been questioned of them in the past.
Yeah, I think the differences from that, obviously the final in 2012, is that them kind of players were all coming to the latter stage of their career, and more importantly, the midfield kind of aspect is all. There's a lot of youth in their experience. Obviously, you'd expect Jorginho to hold with Verratti or Pellegrini and Locatelli beside him, or as a 3, which is quite exciting. I think with Serie A being as competitive as it is this year as well, that's certainly helped the national team with the amount of players that are involved in each side, all Italian. Not like our league in the Premier League. It's quite diverse in terms of nationality, whereas other countries such as like Italy and Germany kind of focus on their national team and in improving on that. But as Sam said, they've got some great talent throughout their squad, and even the old lads are kind of putting their arms around the new lads and help carrying it through. And it's that balance that'll be in there, as you mentioned, the experience of Ciro Immobile, if you can carry that form from this year, 14 goals in 26 games in Serie A. Belotti's also is only 27, coming into the prime of his year. He's similar goal numbers, 11 goals and 5 assists. And also Moise Kean's really shaken off the Everton vibes and got back to some goal-scoring form with PSG.
Immobile in particular, I think he's one that's gone under the radar for years now. It's not just been this year. I mean, he's 1 goal away from 150 Serie A goals now in just over 250 appearances, which is brilliant. And he's in the form of his life, like you say, and in his prime years. So he'd definitely be one to watch for me in terms of individual players.
I think Italy have got the sort of perfect situation, and they've got young players like Donnarumma coming through. You've got experienced leaders and winners like Chiellini, and you've got players like Immobile and Belotti that are in that perfect position where they are going into their prime. So I think they've got parts of each of their squad that just will amalgamate to make a really, really competitive European Championships for them.
And even just like the players like Chiesa and Berardi on either wing, not playing for the big guns, and especially Berardi, but they both of them are really exciting players to get on board. And Italy have not just, with this squad we mentioned, in the past, the likes of Pirlo have controlled play and they've been possession based, whereas the players and the exciting youngsters that they've got now allows them to be a bit more expressive and fast flowing going forward.
Yeah, it sounds as if we're certainly all in agreement that we expect Italy to go through from that group. But in terms of the other teams, we'll kind of touch on them briefly before summarising who we think could go through with Italy. Switzerland, first of all, and one man for them who's stood out in the past and you would expect to stand out this summer, provided he is available, is Xherdan Shaqiri. Devon, he maybe hasn't had, definitely hasn't had as much time on the pitch for Liverpool as he maybe would have liked and as Switzerland would have liked. But do you still expect him to be their key man and key to their hopes of progressing?
If you look at Shaqiri's kind of career path, when he were at Bayern, Inter Milan, maybe not Inter as such, but especially at Bayern and Liverpool, he was always kind of somebody on the periphery. Inter and Stoke, he was more of the main man, but Inter had some very good players around him, but he always seems to turn it on, especially on the national stage. I think we're at the last Euros, he did that overhead kick, and it was very exciting. It's not just him though. There's players around him, like obviously Xhaka can be an important figure. He's shown numerous times for Arsenal how important he is defensively, but it's just his mindset. And also Renato, Stefan in midfield. Them three could really, really partner well. It's just, have they got the goals? Is the defence a little bit too weak? Akanji is a very good player, but he's only coming into his first real tournament, I think. So overall, it's another mix of experience and youngsters, but it's just how they gel, I suppose.
I think Seferovic and Breel could probably provide the goals for Switzerland in the tournament. I think they've been, out of the rest of the three teams in the group, they've been the most consistent recently in their World Cup qualifiers as well. So I actually had them as second place in the group.
Frustratingly,
the problem.
All I was going to say, frustratingly, Italy and Switzerland are both in the World Cup qualifying groups each other, but they've not played each other yet, so we can't quite judge what they are against each other. But I believe they both had a blistering start to their respective campaigns.
Mm-hmm. In terms of other teams, then, Sam said there he had Switzerland penciled in, but I think one team that we have to mention next is Wales, who were, of course, semi-finalists at Euro 2016, had a very successful tournament before losing out to Portugal in the semis. Hal Robson-Kanu was one of the heroes from that squad. But Harry, who are the kind of players who are coming through, weren't involved then, but are set to be heavily involved this time around, that you think could be key for them? I'm kind of thinking, if you want a hint, kind of Dan James, maybe Harry Wilson.
Yeah, most certainly. I was going to hint straight at Daniel James. I think he's going to be the main one because I don't think you can put as much pressure on Gareth Bale as they possibly used to have to. And you've also got to think with Wales that they've got uncertain international management in terms of we're not 100% sure when Ryan Giggs is going to fully come back. But it's good they did qualify for the Euros, and I do think it's going to be a very, very competitive group. And the fact of after Italy, I think all the other three are quite balanced. I'm looking at Turkey. I know Sam said Switzerland. I'm looking at Turkey for the second place. They've had a good World Cup qualifying. They beat Holland. I can't remember the other two. Norway as well. They
3-0.
beat. Haaland, once again didn't show up on the international stage. So Wales look good, but I'm also back in Turkey as well.
Yeah, Devon, what are your thoughts?
Sorry.
Go on, Sam.
I just don't think Wales have enough this time round to make it out of the groups this time. I think they did. They had those role players like you mentioned in the last years, like Robson-Kanu, like Vokes and Gunter and Ramsey. But I just think with Bale not being the player he was during the 2016 Euros, that is going to be a big hit for them.
We've got to remember.
I'd tend to disagree with that, Sam. I think overall from the squad, I think there's a lot more balance than just having one or two star players. I feel like they're more well-rounded and probably a little bit better than that squad. But the problem is the belief still there? That'll be the main question. Obviously, there's numerous questions surrounding Ryan Giggs, isn't there, and outside factors. But players like Kiefer Moore has been smashing it in the Championship, 16 goals, relatively unknown as well.
But this is the
Euros. He's big, he's strong. Yeah, I mean,
it's a different level.
Carnell barely scored in his
true.
featuring beforehand, but all we can go off is how these players are in different teams. And you'd like, for example, like Kiefer Moore is probably above a lot of the rest of the squad that are not in, Premier League, and obviously Ramsey at Juventus, but overall, I think they are balanced. They've got players in there that can create stuff. David Brooks could be one that took importance and really showed why he should be still in the Premier League right now. Even Connor Roberts is probably proud to represent his team being from Swansea, and he's really directed Swansea's directness from right back and right wing. So there's a lot of players in there. There's a lot of versatility as well. One kind of factor that lets them down is that both the goalkeepers, Danny Ward and Hennessy, have really not played this year. So it's about getting minutes into them really beforehand. But are they going to get it on a club stage? Probably not.
I think Joe Rodon's probably going to get a few minutes as well, or hopefully for him he'll get a few minutes. I think he might be a key player. Then you also look at Chris Mepham. He's not getting a lot of minutes at Bournemouth, or at least he's not a constant first team player for the entirety of the season. I think that's part of their problem. That is not all of them, but quite a few of their players aren't playing for their club first team, like you said. So I think that could have quite a big impact going into the tournament if they're not regular players to start with.
Yeah, it'd certainly be a difficult task for Wales to live up to what they did 5 years ago, but you never know. We should probably move on though, but before we do that, we need to decide who we're going to put through as that potential option for the whole tournament from this group, because we're taking 2 through from each group. It sounds like we're pretty divided though. I'm trying to suggest how we do it. I think all 3 of you were kind of leaning towards a different team, weren't you? Is that right?
At Switzerland. I think you could jumble all those 3 teams up. I think it could go any way, to be honest, but I pick Switzerland.
I'd also pick the Swiss to get through, just because I think all round team are probably a lot better and stronger, especially a lot of them overlapping, playing for like Basel, and I think overall the quality, especially in the middle, is better than everyone else, apart from Italy, obviously.
Harry, you're nodding your head, so are you suggesting that you're happy to concede this one?
I'm happy to concede at a 2-1. I think the first game of the tournament is going to be huge. I think Italy versus Turkey is the first game in that group, and I think if Turkey lose that, then they do have a big uphill battle to climb. So yeah, I'm happy to concede to Switzerland on this occasion.
We should mention as well, as we mentioned in the intro, that the third place could go through, and Portugal won the tournament from third place 5 years ago. So we're just doing it in this format. So more to come, I'm sure. Group B, then, moving swiftly on. The teams in this group are Belgium, Denmark, Finland, and Russia. Starting then with Belgium. They've had high expectations placed upon them at several recent major tournaments, and I would argue quite rightly. But Harry, can you see Roberto Martinez's side? Can you see them living up to those expectations this summer?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why not. So I think this will be one of the last tournaments, maybe the World Cup 2022, because it's next year, that they can get that major tournament. This is their golden generation, and I think they have to capitalize now. I think in this group, especially, no one's got the quality across the pitch as they do. I do find it a bit odd Roberto Martinez is leading them to another competition, because I think they should have done better in a few of the ones they have been in. But any team with Kevin De Bruyne and Lukaku can make a good case to win a competition.
Lukaku,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, you mentioned Lukaku there, Harry. I think he's just in the form of his life right now. He's absolutely lethal for Inter at the moment. 27 goals in all competitions. He's got 59 for Belgium in 91 appearances, which just shows how lethal he is. And when you've got the likes of Dries Mertens and Kevin De Bruyne, Eden Hazard feeding him, he's going to get bags of goals. And like Carrie says, I think they're one of the most well-rounded teams in this tournament, and they'll be up there as one of the favourites to win it all, and they should be.
Well, it's not just his goals as well. 36 goal involvements in 36 games. It's his all round, and we already know, like, when at Man United, he's just utilised completely wrong in the end, and he's got a lot of his critics shaken off now, and already being linked with a move back to the Premier League. And I mean, Lukaku's just indispensable, and you compare the other strikers around him, that he's some way above them. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Harry certainly isn't the first person to question whether Martinez should still be in that job, but I think the pressure is going to be on for them this summer. I think it sounds like we all expect them to get into the latter stages, so they're going to be one of the teams. I think it's safe to say that. In terms of the rest of them, and a couple of these impressed at the last World Cup 3 years ago. I'm going to start with Russia, it was, of course, their home World Cup. They reached the quarterfinals after beating Spain in the last 16. Devon, do you worry that could have maybe been a bit of a one-off, and that, you know, they got there because of the home advantage? How do you think they'll fare this time around?
I think we everybody said that without the home advantage, they probably wouldn't have got that far. They have got a couple of exciting players within the squad, but overall it seems like there was a team spirit, and if they could carry that through to this one, they're in with a shot, because, you know, arguably probably better than Finland, and it's probably going to be between them and Denmark, in my opinion, but they certainly shocked everyone, and I think people underestimated them, whereas now people might be more prepared for them. But overall, I think they rode a little bit of luck. I think there were a few decisions that went their way, and also, players like Cheryshev, it turned out that he just wanted to be the main player in that tournament, and he still got 5 goals in qualifying, and probably their best outlet, either him or Golovin, it was their most creative spark.
Yeah, Harry, Devon there mentioned he quite fancies Denmark, and of course in their team they've got the likes of Kasper Schmeichel, I should say, Pierre Højbjerg, who you know well from his days at Southampton, as well as Christian Eriksen. At the 2018 World Cup, they made it to the last 16 before going out on pens. They also drew with eventual winners France in their group, so there was no shame in what they did. Where do you see them placing in this group?
Yeah, I think there's a clear 1, 2, 3, 4. I think Denmark, just because of their resistant spine, like you said, they've got Kasper Schmeichel, they've got Højbjerg, Delaney, Eriksen, Vestergaard, Poulsen. I think that their middle spine, I think, will really, really, help them in this group. And 14 goals in the recent World Cup qualifying international break, I think they're not going to top the group, but I certainly think they're going to get into the knockout stages and get second place. Because I think there's a clear gap in quality between them, Finland, and Russia.
Group B as well, Sam. Before we move on, features the team who are going to be my second team in this tournament, Finland.
Well, I think I should leave this to you then to talk about Finland. Go for it, George.
Well, I don't need to reveal why they're my second team, but I do. There are certainly question marks over how they get through this group, because, as we've kind of mentioned there are strengths in all 3 of the other teams. One thing I would say is that if this is their first ever major tournament, there's going to be one hell of a will to impress, because their fans and their players would have been waiting for this for a long time. I think they definitely rely on Teemu Pukki for goals. They definitely did in their qualifying campaign. And maybe it looks unlikely for them. I certainly can't predict that they're going to finish in second spot. I would like them to go through as third, purely just from a biased point of view, because I'd love to see Pukki get through. But no, I wouldn't consider them one of the top 2.
I think Denmark are a solid second place for me. 3 for 3 in their World Cup qualifier so far. And like the other guys mentioned, they got such a solid spine in that team with Casper Dolberg at the tip of the iceberg as well. He's an exciting young striker, so I think I would have them as my second place.
Yeah, and lots of heads nodding when you said that, Sam. So there we go. That's locked in. Belgium and Denmark going in from Group B, but maybe Finland could be this tournament's Iceland. You never know. Moving on to Group C then. In this group is Austria, Netherlands, North Macedonia, who qualified through the playoffs, and Ukraine. I should mention the only team in this group to have ever progressed beyond the group stage in the European Championships is the Netherlands. So again, Devon, surely we're looking at them as the dead certs in this group to move through.
Yes and no. And it's time for another international manager rant, because I just don't understand why Frank de Boer is in charge of this talented Netherlands side. Obviously, going from Ajax, I think he did a really good job there, but he's not being able to sustain a sort of position apart from the Netherlands, which mostly is being given because of COVID. He's had that extended period. They have got talent throughout, and I think just purely on the group, I don't think they'll finish top, personally. I think Austria are a very good, well-built side, but just because of Frank de Boer's influence. But they certainly, if right under the right person, they could have gone on far in this tournament, I believe. So
you don't think they'll finish top? Who are your team that you think will finish top?
I think Austria are quite a well-built side and just seem a bit of a dark horse. I think they've got some.
They were the dark horse of Euro 2016, and they sort of failed to live up to those expectations, Austria. But go on.
No, you just feel a little bit like there's more importance on some of them better players. If I can just turn my page quickly for some others, but it's a bit so has been pulling up trees for the last few years, and Arnautovic is obviously an important player, but overall there is quite like just like their midfield is really strong. I think about the Baumgartner brothers are excellent working together, and Alaba's a real leader, and he's certainly one that could be more of the person that's going to spearhead everything off as a leader point. I can't really get my words out then. Sam really threw me off, but yeah, I think just if Netherlands weren't in charge, if Frank de Boer weren't in charge, I think Netherlands would have got that every other day. I just think there's no sort of oomph apart from that. The group's quite weak.
So Devon there has made his case for Austria and has also expressed concerns about the Netherlands. Sam, would you agree that there's maybe some areas where they could come unstuck?
Yeah, Netherlands are an interesting one. I think one of the bigger talking points going into the tournament, I think, is them with all the young talent that they've got. But obviously, having not qualified for the last two tournaments, they're all pretty relatively inexperienced when it comes to international tournaments as a team. And with Van Dijk obviously having his big injury this season, it's not certain whether he'll play in the Euros, so that'll be big. But obviously, like I mentioned, the young talent that they have got, De Ligt, who's only 21, unbelievably, De Jong, Malen, who's been really good in Eredivisie this season, 16 goals, I think, for PSV. And obviously Memphis Depay, who's matured a lot since his move away from Manchester United back to Lyon. So I think they've got a lot of talent. But like Devon mentioned earlier, with De Boer in charge, that does feel like a bit of a weird managerial appointment. He's in his recent job suggests he's not quite cut out for this sort of level of football, but we'll see. I think there'll be one that I'm watching closely as we get into the tournament.
Yeah, it sounds as if we've got fairly high hopes for both Netherlands and Austria. But Harry, the other two teams in this group, would you hold out any sort of optimism for them?
I mean, North Macedonia did fantastically well to beat Germany, but there's a lot of teams that do that one-off sort of business and then don't do anything. But they did well to qualify for the Euros, and the Ukraine, they drew 1-0 in all of their recent games with Finland and Kazakhstan. Probably should have beaten, but they did draw 1-0 with France as well. So once again, I think it is going to be a clear 1-2. I think Netherlands will win just off the fact that I think they've got a much better squad than any of the other three. I think if you put them in any other group, I think it's a lot more competitive. And I think they've got slightly lucky with that, because I do agree with Sam and Devon that the appointment of De Boer is it's just a strange one. I just don't understand. I don't really understand it. I think the next Euros will be their sort of tournament when they have all their key players back from injury. Well, I mean, probably Van Dijk back from injury. He should be back in 4 years' time or 3 years' time. Littered with De Ligt, who'll have that extra experience and he'll probably have a couple more trophies under his belt. And yeah, so I think Netherlands, Austria. I would say Austria, but they got battered by Denmark and drew 2-2 with Scotland. So I just don't think they've quite got it. So yeah, it's a Netherlands, Austria 1-2 for me.
Yeah, would you say we're all in agreement with that? Obviously, we don't actually have to define which one we think is going to come top and which one we think is going to come second. So it's pretty clear we're maybe not too sure on that. So that'll be one to keep an eye on for sure. So Netherlands and Austria go through. Group D then is the one that we're going to be particularly interested in, because that is where England find themselves alongside Croatia, the Czech Republic, and of course Scotland, who also got through the playoffs like North Macedonia. So England and Croatia will clash again, not for the first time since the World Cup semi-final, because of course they had that Nations League, a couple of bouts there as well. Sam, are you expecting both to go through, or do you think it could be quite difficult? Because of course Scotland and the Czechs have got some strengths as well.
They do. I think I have put England, Croatia 1-2, but the thing is with England in particular, I think what was great about obviously the 2018 World Cup, we went into it with a lot less expectation as England fans than we usually do going into international tournaments. But in this situation, there is going to be a lot more pressure, a lot more expectation on this young team to perform in what is basically a home tournament. And with all the talent that we've got, which we've talked about in loads of detail in other episodes, so I won't get into it too much. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Southgate to get the tactics right and get the best out of these attacking players in particular. I think defensively is where we're a bit more weak compared to some of the other bigger teams in this tournament. But I think we should expect to get out of this group pretty comfortably. I know we've had a bit of a rivalry with Croatia recently, with obviously them knocking us out of the World Cup and us getting them back in the Nations League. But they're a bit of an aging squad. I think they've got some really talented players. Obviously Modric, who was the player of the tournament at the World Cup, and obviously Rebic and other players like that. They'll be a dangerous team, but I expect England to get out of this group comfortably.
Yeah, Luka Modric, Devon, is now well into his 30s, of course. Can you see him kind of leading Croatia into the latter stages again? How do you see it going?
Luka Modric has probably been Croatia's best player over the last 10 years. There's no one really been. The only other noticeable player has been
all
that
time,
Joseph
probably.
Simovic. Yeah, probably all time. But according to my stepdad, Croatia had a very good side back in the 90s as well. Just didn't really do anything. As he saw one of the games, I think at Villa Park in Euro 96. But either way, the whole Croatia are kind of a side that's under the radar, and I think they showed that especially in the World Cup. They've got good balance, as we've mentioned quite a few times. We've got a couple of key players, and then even the players that are playing supporting roles, such as like Vasalenko. He's a top quality right back. I think he showed that in the World Cup, and then I think he got his move to a big side, but I can't, off the top of my head, I cannot remember who. They've got goals as well. Perisic is very important at the top, and he'll probably play either side of Rebic or Kramovic if he can ignite that form that he showed at Hoffenheim in spells, but not really in bulks. But I think Croatia will probably be one of the favourites, as well as England, to go through as them top two.
Yeah, and you mentioned Euro 96 there, a team in this group who haven't qualified for this competition since Euro 96 is Scotland. Harry, I think I heard on Monday night, Dave Jones on Sky said that Graham Souness said he was feeling fairly optimistic about Scotland's chances. Do you think they're right to think that, given some of the players in their
I think
squad?
there's a similar situation to the Group A. I think England should qualify top of the group. I think the quality compared to the other teams is on another level. But I do think Scotland could be a dangerous team to play against. A lot of their players, look at the John McGinn, the Scott McTominay, the Kieran Tierney, the Che Adams now as well. A lot of them are in good form in the Premier League. They're slowly building a team rather than a squad of players, and that's shown from relatively impressive the European campaign. I know they got a few draws in there rather than wins, but I think they've been decent. I think the Czech Republic are going under the radar. A good draw with Belgium. They battered Estonia. They did lose to Wales though, but the emergence of Kufal and Souček in the Premier League has really awoken people to those. And I think people forget that England have had relatively recent history of all three of these teams. They lost the Czech Republic in qualifying about a year ago. The Scotland one is always there, the narrow 3-2 win, the 2-2 draw, and obviously, like we've mentioned, the Croatia loss. So I think it's going to be a very, very competitive group, and England have got to keep their wits about that. They should qualify top of the group, but weirder things have happened. Weirder things have happened.
Yeah, and I think you're right there to point out the threat of the Czech Republic as well, because we were saying before recording, I've kind of overlooked the Czech Republic when I view this England group just kind of in a relaxed way, thinking, oh, we'll beat them. But the likes of Souček and Sofao have come into West Ham and proven just how solid and how strong they are. And I think that could prove to be a dangerous game as well. I think the Scotland one is one that will definitely stand out, because Scotland are going to be so keen to prove to England just how good they are. So that's going to be one worth watching. But it appears from what we've said, we're thinking England and Croatia is kind of the top two in this group. Yeah, would I be right in thinking that?
I'd love Scotland to. I'd love Callum Paterson to lead Scotland and Liam Palmer into the round of 16, but I can't see it. I think the problem with Scotland is they've got the quality, but they've never actually lived up to something. They always should do better, but tend to disappoint. And I think a little bit when we played them, when we drew 2-2 at Hampden Park, they thought they'd done it with Griffiths, and we've kind of just knocked them down a peg with that last minute goal. But it is really Scotland's probably biggest chance to actually make a name for themselves and show why there's a bit of Scottish spirit. But Leeds born Oliver Burnley's not really going to score many, is he? And they've not. It's probably a bit. It's where their good goals are going to come from. Probably going to get a lot from midfield from McGinn and McTominay, as we've said. But to answer your question, sorry to butt in and then just make a point and not make anything. I do think that the top two will stay like that. Yeah. But I think it'll be one of them groups that's quite tight as well.
The thing is, I was going to say, if they can nick a win against the Czech Republic on the opening day and we draw with Croatia and they head into the game against England top of the group, I think that blows the group wide open, because then beating Czech Republic and us drawing Croatia, it's not out of the realms of possibility. So I wouldn't sleep. I know none of us are, but I wouldn't sleep on Scotland, and I wouldn't be surprised if they just nick that second spot.
It's just all about that first game, isn't it? As soon as if you get that first result, I mean, we saw it last year when we in the World Cup, when if we'd have drawn with Tunisia, that might have knocked any sort of confidence. But with that last minute Harry Kane goal, it seemed to just alight everyone. And obviously, the domino effect after that was truly remarkable.
I'm not accepting anything but first from England.
Yeah,
no excuses this time round. I'll be very disappointed if we don't finish top of this group.
Well, I think
it's a friendable situation. How Gareth Southgate's in charge of this, I don't know, but
I think it's different to De Boer. I think he's earned the chance to be at this tournament based on the last one, but that's
he's definitely earned it. But my argument is that he shouldn't have been in that position to earn it anyway. But
yeah, that's for another day. That's for next week. Never mind.
Get that waistcoat clean dry. Let's go.
Okay, moving on to Group E. In this group, Poland, Slovakia, Spain, Sweden. I think this is another pretty difficult one to call, if I'm honest. Starting with Spain, they've had a pretty miserable last couple of tournaments, to be honest, after a pretty dominant spell beforehand. Sam, is this the one where they start to recover and show some mettle again?
It's difficult with Spain. It really is. Like you mentioned, they've had a wretched record at major tournaments since Euro 2012, and they've got a very young team, an exciting young team with Ferran Torres, Dani Olmo, Mike Oyarzabal. That's a hard name to say, but obviously got Ramos at the back as well, leading the team, and he's just a fantastic player. Over 100 career goals from defence, which is just ridiculous. 180 caps now for Spain. So he's one of the main players for them, but it's difficult, and there's some other really decent teams in this group, especially Sweden and Poland. So it's difficult to predict with Spain. I think they'll get through, but I'm not sure about topping this group.
Yeah, you mentioned Sweden and Poland there, and turning out for those two teams is going to be Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who's come out of international retirement recently, and Robert Lewandowski for Poland. That's if he recovers from his injury, but that's not serious, is it? So he should be there. But how exciting is that prospect, Harry, having those sort of players in the same group? It's going to be good games so early on in the tournament.
I just think it gives them a massive chance to go through. You know, when you've got a Lewandowski, when you've got a Zlatan Ibrahimovic, you know your team is going to have goals. And I can't give that guarantee for Spain. You know, Morata started the most recent fixture and they are the front players. They're not going to concede many. Don't get me wrong. They're not going to concede many goals with a great goalkeeper and a strong back four, like you mentioned, with Ramos right at the heart of it. But yeah, I think that's going to give them a good chance. You know, I don't think they're going to win the tournament by any stretch of the imagination, because I think the rest of the pitch, letting them down is a very harsh word, but I just don't think is of the standard of the better teams. But when you've got a world-class striker, I think you've seen from all different club teams and internationals, and anything can happen. And I think the second spot is really up for grabs. I don't think Slovakia will go through, but I think any of the other three, it's going to be a real battle.
Yeah, Lewandowski's got a decent supporting cast at Poland as well. I think we saw it in the game they played against England as well. You got Milik, Klich, Zielinski as well, who are dangerous players. And like you say, Lewandowski, probably the best striker in the world right now. 42 goals this season, another fantastic season for him. So when you've got a player like that, you're always going to have a chance in any of these tournament games, which are usually quite tight, even though the opposition might be worlds apart.
Devon, Slovakia probably not going to be pushovers either, but as Harry said there, that they're going to be the underdogs out of this four, aren't they?
Definitely, I think in terms of pedigree as well, I think the other three teams are all, you'd probably, even though Slovakia have always been kind of there, they've never really been able to puncture anyone or stake a claim to be a surprise. They have got a few good players, but the players that are in question, like Hamšík and Kuka, they're kind of coming towards sort of a mid-range towards the end of the career as well. As mentioned several times, I think Poland are very exciting. I think this side is, kind of, they've got grit. They're quite robust. I think the midfield is fantastic defensively, and they've got the players to really complement Lewandowski. I mean, you utilise him right. 35 goals in 25 league games. That's an incredible record, and I think he's probably been the best player in the world for the last year and a half. But obviously, he's been incredible through his career, whether at Dortmund or at Bayern. The thing with Spain is that I feel like the tiki-taka era kind of came out of nowhere, and that's where they took advantage of it for several years. But now they've not been able to adapt to any sort of style, and the connotations of the tiki-taka slick football has not been able to carry through. Even in the last tournament, I think the managerial change on the eve of the tournament was not ideal. So overall, I think Spain kind of looked the most damaged. And when we think about past Spanish teams, this is completely on a different level underneath that. I think I don't think they'll hit any sort of heights this tournament.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds as if we're kind of pinpointing Poland as the team who we're pretty confident will go through, but we're not sure on the second one. How are we going to decide this? personally, if we want to go round, I think I would go for Spain.
And I've got Luis Enrique in charge as well, who had some success at Barcelona, obviously winning the Champions League with them. So he's got some experience and will know some of these players quite well. So I would probably have Spain going through. I just don't think it'll be tough for them to top the group.
Mm-hmm. Worth noting as well, Sweden last reached the knockout stages of this competition in 1992. That was when they made the semis. So maybe they'll prove us wrong, but they could even go through in third, as we've already mentioned. But there we go. We're taking Poland and Spain through with us to the debate at the end, where we try and decide who's going to win this. Somehow we're going to do that. I don't know how, because we've talked about so many strong teams. Group F then, finally, last but by no means least.
Speaking of strong teams.
Absolutely.
The group of death.
Hungary. Oh.
This is the group that has been viewed as the group of death ever since the balls were pulled out. There are 3 former winners in there.
Out of context, George.
Unfortunate wording there, George. But
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know. Give me another word I could have used.
Move on.
So 3 former winners in this group F, including the current holders of the competition, of course. So those 3 former winners are France, Germany, and Portugal, the 2016 winners. Hungary in there as well, I should say. How can we possibly separate these teams? Does someone want to try and give me their view as to who stands out?
I think France. Go on, Harry.
I was going to say, is anyone debating that France is going to be the number 1 team? I think they're the tournament favourites. I wouldn't say by a long way, but I think their second team probably makes at least the semi-finals. So I think their first team will certainly do that. I think Mbappe, one of, if not the best young player of the world. Words escape me sometimes. Next to Erling Haaland, I know Lloris is getting a bit on, but defensive line strong. Midfield, if you get the France version of Pogba playing for France in this Euros, then I think this competition, or at least the group stage, is completely done. And I think it's between Germany and Portugal. Germany, even though they have only lost 1, I think, qualifying game since 2001, and that was against North Macedonia, they just, for some reason, seem to be very inconsistent. And I think Portugal are going to nip that second place.
France's squad depth is just absolutely ridiculous. Like, they have so many players they can pick from, and it's hard to look past them as the favourites to win it all. I know that's boring considering they're world champions, but like Harry mentioned, Kylian Mbappe, one of the best young players in the world right now. Griezmann, he's obviously had his struggles with Barcelona, but he's still lethal for France. So is Giroud, so is Pogba, who plays alongside Kante in that midfield, and they just work so well in that midfield 3 with Griezmann slightly more forward. Obviously in defence, they've got Kimpembe, Varane, Longley, Upamecano, Lucas Hernandez, so many players they can pick from. The squad depth is just absolutely ridiculous. And Portugal, I think they've also got Ronaldo still going strong, over 100 goals for Portugal now, and he's got a great supporting cast with Bruno Fernandes, Bernardo Silva, Ruben Diaz. I think they're a really good team. So I'd probably, if I was to, go on.
No, go on, Sam. You were finishing off. I apologise.
Well, I'd probably go with France and Portugal as my top 2 because of the struggles that Germany have had. I think Joachim Löw's leaving after this Euros, because obviously they've been a bit inconsistent in the tournaments. Obviously losing to North Macedonia most recently. They've still got some great players, obviously, in their Germany. They always tend to do well, but I mean, we'll see. It's a really tough group.
Yeah, I was just going to say there, when you were talking about Portugal, I would argue, and I think several people would probably argue this in the past, but their squad right now, Portugal's, is so much stronger than the one that actually won it 5 years ago. So, Devon, would you agree that Portugal look like they're probably going to be pushing France a bit more than Germany?
It's really difficult when we've got 3 of the best squads in one group together. Like the France's squad's undeniably brilliant, because I think every one of their starting 11 is starting for the biggest teams in their countries, pretty much. And the other other teams, such as, just trying to scroll through all three teams, obviously, no offense, but if Hungary win this, then it'll get through. Because the problem is that we are probably going to lose one of the three without the third place, because you expect the two teams to be up there will have had to have beat, or well, I suppose it's a draw, but other teams could get that third place instead of them. So you'd expect the two that go through to probably go on to the final, in my opinion. But it's a tough call. But I do think Germany are just probably edge in terms of squad and dominance in the country. I think the edge Portugal, personally.
You would be inclined to go Germany. We should probably try and make a decision on this. But before we do, I should say we've kind of all written off Hungary, and I'm about to make a case for them getting out of this group. But good luck to them. I think they can kind of go into it expecting nothing and just see what happens. So we'll see how that goes. How are we going to divide this? Personally, I would probably go with Portugal behind France. Sam and Harry, is that?
I agree.
Yeah.
It does feel. It feels wrong in some way to not take Germany through, doesn't it? But I think
they are stalwarts of international competition, aren't they, Germany? And they always seem to find something, but they haven't recently. And I just think the attacking talent, particularly for Portugal, they could go into this tournament without Ronaldo and still fancy themselves. I think they've got loads of great players going forward, in particular, and obviously Ruben Diaz. We've seen what he's capable of at City this season at the back. So it is tough. Obviously, it's a group of death, like we say, but I would go with Portugal.
It is scary to see, like, with obviously Portugal, you'd expect a back two of Font and Diaz, who, well, Font's been one of the better defenders in League 1 this year as well. And Carvajal in defensive midfield, allowing, the likes of Cancelo and Rafael Guerreiro to get forward. Bruno Fernandes, depends if big games, because he'll not turn up for them. Bernardo Silva as well from deep. João Felix is starting to come into his own this year, and Diogo Jota has just taken that next step to stardom. And obviously, no one can. Ronaldo, obviously, the final was Ronaldo managed the team to victory because he went off injured, but Ronaldo just takes responsibilities in these situations, doesn't he? Even if they are struggling, like we saw against the Porto game, Ronaldo tried to make things happen. It was his teammates that sort of let him down in the end, with Szczesny just not taking his risk to the Champions League game with him. But yeah, I'm happy to concede to Portugal, but there's something about this German side, like the likes of Kimmich, I think are one of the best players in the world, and it just really depends on whether Timo Werner can actually find his boots or something.
Werner and Havertz are meant to be the next generation of this Germany team, but we've seen their struggles this season at Chelsea, and that's also tipping me towards Portugal.
I mean, you never know. Ilkay Gundogan could carry on his form from Man City as well and make a case, but again, it's relying on the deep players rather than with Portugal. You've got even Guerreiro could probably outscore most strikers in this tournament from left back. It's the attacking prowess that they have that's just scary, I think. So if we go Portugal and France, then I'd like the Germans to be put in that conversation. But again, it's going to make the best games, isn't it?
Yeah, we seem to maybe have more doubts about the Germans, but as you say there, Devon, it would certainly not be a surprise.
They could all go through, because it could be very even. Like all the games that they play, they could all beat each other, and they'll probably all end up going through.
Yeah, they could quite easily prove us wrong, but we will go with Portugal for the way we are doing it and the way we are doing this podcast.
France and Hungary.
We've gone to poor old Hungary. We've gone through every group now, so now we want to try and sort of find a final. We have split the tournament in two. Looking at it on my notepad now, it looks like one half of the draw is particularly stronger than the other, but that doesn't matter. So we're going to pick one team from either half, and then we're going to decide on a final. This is, of course, all hypothetical, but it's just a bit of fun. So let us know in the comments if you think that what we've done is just ridiculous. But anyway, on with it. So on one half of the draw, I'm going to call it the left half, the teams from A, B, and C. The 6 teams we've got are Italy, Switzerland, Belgium, Denmark, Netherlands, and Austria. Now, considering we're talking about teams who we think are going to win the eventual tournament, who are the teams that stand out to you as ones that we can probably say now we can put a line through? That's open to anyone.
Switzerland.
Sam? Switzerland, yeah. Do we agree with that? Yeah. Probably Austria too.
Yeah.
Netherlands.
Yes, the Sam.
Too early for Netherlands, I think, as well.
Netherlands and maybe Denmark as well.
Yeah.
Because I think we've discussed all of these teams and their strengths in terms of getting through the group, but now we've kind of talked for long enough. Let's try and get to the nitty gritty, the best teams in this tournament. So I'm going to put a line through Denmark. That leaves us with Italy and Belgium to fight it out for a place in the final, as we're calling it.
You see, I'd argue that I think Denmark could go further than Belgium, just because Belgium seem to always tail off at a point.
Would you really? That's...
Yeah.
Not this year for me. This, like we said, this has to be Belgium's year, really. I mean, there's teams on the other side of the draw that I think would be capable of beating them, but I think the talent that we've already mentioned, Kevin De Bruyne, Hazard, Lukaku, Mertens, and at the back, Vertonghen and Alderweireld, who have played together for years at Spurs and know each other really well. Thibaut Courtois in goal, who's been really good for Real Madrid, shrugging off the doubters. Obviously, the Chelsea fans are a bit annoyed that he left, but they're just one of the most well-rounded teams.
Mm-hmm. No, it's an interesting suggestion, Devon, and we should say as well, the way the tournament works, it's very confusing. I was looking at a tournament tree yesterday, but with the fact that certain third place teams go through, there could be some sort of crisscross. So Germany, if they were to finish in third, as we were kind of suggesting, they could easily face someone from the left side of the draw. So it could go in any way. And there we have a tournament tree provided by Devon by 442, who, they don't sponsor us. I don't know what I was going to say there.
If it's high to hire us, we are open for that.
Open for some sponsorship. Anyway, we've gone on for too long. How are we going to decide between Italy and Belgium? I'm kind of leaning with Sam on this one. I think the argument he's made there for Belgium is a strong one. We've seen how they've struggled. Well, not struggled at tournaments before, but not lived up to expectation. And I do think this could be their year. Harry,
I mean,
what are your thoughts?
They finished third at the World Cup.
True, it's true.
They had a pretty decent World Cup. I mean, they beat us twice, pretty comprehensively. So,
I think on a one-off game, I think Belgium can beat anybody, and that's what I think they'll get to the final. Out of all these teams that we've looked at, that's the reason. I think Belgium, this is going to be their year to get to the final, not win it, because I think France will. Sorry to ruin the second half, but I think Belgium will get to the final.
There we go.
I do feel like Belgium are just that team that they can go under the radar, but also the performances can drop massively from game to game. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit like Hazard. Hazard can be absolutely brilliant on his day, but then sometimes when he's not on it, he's really not on it. And this is the Belgium side that he kind of personifies. And there's probably, you never know, players like Kevin De Bruyne will probably take more importance than Hazard currently, and especially Lukaku. And if he can carry that form on, then he could definitely drag it. Imagine De Bruyne and Lukaku linking up in the form that both of them are in currently.
Yeah, so there we go. I think we're pretty settled on Belgium being the first team in the final. Okay, so we've decided on Belgium as our first finalist, but I feel like it could be a bit more difficult to work out the second one. On the second half of the draw, we've got another 6 teams. They are England, Croatia, Poland, Spain, France, and Portugal. We need to decide who out of this list maybe we're not even going to consider discussing. There's maybe 1 or 2 which are standing out to me on this one, but one of which is Spain. Any nods of the head or shakes of the head on that? Yeah, you're happy with getting rid of Spain?
It'll be a repeat of 16 when they went out in round off at 16.
Croatia's probably another one that we weren't too sure on. Of course, this is just, we're trying to be quick with this, so we're not completely writing them off, as we've already given them some praise anyway. Poland, again, can you see, if anyone can make a case for them, then fine.
Not to the final. I think they need one more than just one absolutely world. I know they got good players, but they need more than just one world-class player for me. Sorry, Devon, you're about to...
I was say, even in that Polish game when they played England, you could tell if they had Lewandowski, we would not have won that. Personally, I think they created enough chances without, chances for Lewandowski.
Well, their goal was John Stones messing about with it. So
yeah, and obviously, but you you can't do that anyway with anyone. But apart from that, if they had Lewandowski, it probably brings the spirit up. But if we were doing it game by game and we were doing, say, like Poland versus this team, then easily we could decipher where, because you never know where people are going to finish, how it's going to pan out. So I'd probably, in terms of final 2, I don't think Poland will get into that final.
Okay, I think I'm going to put a line through Poland, but we've talked about how strong they are. That leaves us with England, France, and Portugal. Personally, I think we'd all love to see England do it, and I think this is probably our best chance of doing it. The team out of those 3 is probably the French. I think Sam said this while we were going through the groups, that as boring as that sounds as the tournament favourites, it's hard to look beyond them. Devon, all 3 of you. I'll go to Harry first. Where are you leaning?
I think whoever beats France wins the tournament. I think it's as simple as that. I think if England beat France, England win the tournament. I think this side of the group, or this side of the knockout stage, win it for me. Maybe if Belgium get there, just because they've beaten us on multiple occasions. But out of all these teams, I want England to do it. I really, really want it. But I just see the quality of France through the squad. I see if they get knocks or injuries anywhere, I think anyone bar Mbappe in this team is replaceable. And I can't see them not winning the Euros again this year. I think it's going to be that sort of Spain 2008, 2010 thing where they win back-to-back tournaments. So yeah, it's going to be France for me.
A lot of England fans think we have a selection headache. Go and look at France and you'll probably change your mind, because I think they could make about 7 teams that could compete at this Euros, 7 starting 11s.
Even their uncapped 11 would probably beat England, ridiculous. In my opinion. Like the fact that players like Laporte haven't got a cap yet, and you just look at their starting 11, France are too good, but I can't see England getting further than, in my opinion, the quarters would probably be a good one for us. I know we should go on to do better, but realistically, I think quarters would be.
Is it another tournament too early for England, would you say? Is it another tournament too early?
It shouldn't.
Again, I think it's just a wrong sort of setup that we've got.
I think playing at Wembley might. Well, I don't know where we'll be playing for last 16 and quarters, but if we get to the semis at Wembley, it could maybe give us the advantage over Portugal or France, but I'm not.
Do you think it's also the big debate is whether fans are there? Because
it's looking like there's going to be
UEFA are saying if a country can't have fans, so they're not hosting any games. Because I think Ireland have that problem at the moment. They're not sure whether they can have fans, and UEFA says then you're not going to host any games.
I think the plan is for there to be at least 20,000 to 25,000 in there, and that's from the start of the tournament. So I think there will be some sort of fans. But anyway, I think it's sounding like we're leaning towards France as much as we'd like England to do it. and we like Portugal too. But would you say Belgium, France is kind of that's leading the way
it's
here?
Hard. Yeah. Of course, it's harsh on all the other teams that have made out the groups to do it this way. But if we have to, then I would go France. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. As we say, if we have to make a decision, like we could talk about this for hours, couldn't we? And we have already talked about it for an hour, so we're going to move on with it swiftly. Belgium against France. That's our final that we've worked towards here. Sam, I'll go to you first. I know you wanted to kind of touch on this final in a bit of depth. What are the key battles that you maybe see playing out, and what would you make of that?
Yeah, it's very tough to call. I think maybe where Belgium edge France is maybe up top, like very up top. Obviously, Giroud is very good. Has been very lethal for France. I think he's their top scorer of all time for France. But I think Lukaku probably edged him in that. If I'm putting them head to head. But we've got the midfield battle as well, obviously with Kevin De Bruyne. But France, with that partnership of Pogba and Kante, I think they're pretty solid on that. And those two have played alongside each other quite a lot, with, like I mentioned earlier, Griezmann just in front of them, supporting Mbappe and Koeman on the wings and Giroud up top. So I think although they have lots of players to pick from, France are pretty solid on their starting 11. And I just there's such a well-rounded team. Obviously, Belgium are as well, but I can't look past France, to be honest. And they've had so much experience together as a team as well. Obviously at the previous Euros as well. Now the World Cup, now the Euros again. They've just got better with age, and I think they're the team to beat in the tournament. Like Harry says, if you can beat France, you'll probably win the whole thing.
Sorry.
Go on, Dave.
I say when you pair them up, though, even you mentioned Sam, the whole forward line saying Lukaku, but Lukaku doesn't show up. You've got to look at the people that are below them as well. Batshuayi. So you're going to pull up any trees. Is it Dooku or Dude? I can't remember his proper name now. But but with France, they've got Giroud if they want to play with somebody a bit more as a target man. They've got Mbappe who they can just lean on. Griezmann can still play. Ben Yedder, even Anthony Martial can be. Yeah.
Lacazette, Edouard, Benzema if they want to bring him back. I mean, come on.
It just depends if he's got a camera, I suppose. But the only kind of balancing ground is that midfield. I mean, a midfield three of De Bruyne, Tielemans, and who would probably play CDM?
Witsel, maybe. Does he sit in the heart of it?
Maybe Witsel, and then compare, but also Kante, Pogba, maybe Nzonzi, or if they just played a two and then had Martial in centre attacking midfield, that's just complete. I mean, even the full-backs, Pavard's probably one of the better right-backs in the world. Luka Hernandez or Digne are much better than Castagna and Meunier, because Meunier is absolutely dreadful. But overall, it's just doing it side by side. France, there's no doubt, France are much better as a team, chemistry-wise and ability-wise as well.
Yeah, and who knows how kind of the games are going to go in the lead up to this. So as always, we have to stress this is 2 months before the tournament. So this is just a bit of fun we're doing. But Harry, are you in agreement that it's France, isn't it? We're thinking it's going to be France.
I think their midfield overruns the Belgian midfield. I know Sam said that Alderweireld and Vertonghen play together for a long time, but if you play together for a long time, that also means that you're probably quite old. And I think Mbappe runs absolute rings around them. And like you said, I think they're just better in almost every position along the park. And if you're better in every position and you've got the history of winning a competition that Belgium don't, they haven't won these big sort of games, I think France have got it. I think if France get into the final and they face Belgium, I think they've won it.
We've really seen a coming of age for Mbappe this season as well, in the Champions League, especially the hat-trick at the Nou Camp, the 2 goals he scored against Bayern the other night. He's really, he was brilliant in the World Cup anyway, but he's just had 3 more years of experience under his belt now. And he's top talent.
I mean, one of the things I can remember is in the semi-finals, was it Argentina versus France. Did it finish 5-2, 5-3?
That was last 16.
Last 16. Well, then between them, two great sides, and just even when France looked like they were on the back end, they could just outscore anyone as well. Albeit Griezmann were in the form of his life as well at Atleti. So just overall, though, it's just so strong. It's sad that we're not talking about England in this, because there is the potential that we could have, under the right tactics, expressing the players that we want to, we could get this far, but are we? Probably not.
I think if someone knocks out France before we get to them, I think we've got an excellent chance. Someone else needs to cause an upset, because I just can't see England causing an upset.
To be the best, you got to beat the best.
Yeah.
I mean, I said it when the group was polled, is that anyone who gets out of, if France go 3 for 3 in that group, no, there's no one stopping them. But you never know. There might be a shock, and Germany and Portugal could beat France. France be that third place team, and then France don't get through because they didn't get the necessary points compared to the other third place teams in groups that are arguably weaker. So it's the balancing act, and it's anything can happen. This third place thing, as George has criticised a lot of times today, it's just not working. Can we just have a standard tournament like normal? It's like the UEFA format, innit? Just keep it normal.
Yeah, it would have been nice, but we're getting the same with the World Cup, aren't we? Anyway, it would appear that we have found that France are our hypothetical winners. As I said, I will stress again, it's 2 months before the tournament. We're just doing this for a bit of fun, but I've enjoyed it. I think we've all kind of enjoyed it. We hope you've enjoyed it, seeing us discuss this and give our views and kind of go back and forth on stuff like that. But yeah, we think it could be France. But that's kind of all from us this week. It's been a longer episode than usual, so we don't want to add a quiz onto the end of it, because we know that, the attention span for these podcasts maybe is shorter than the length of this one. Rest assured that we'll be back next week, right, Sam? Yeah,
should be. Yeah,
I need to make up the point, so I better be back.
Yeah,
we got a Southampton theme quiz next.
Yeah, rest assured, I can tell you it will be back next week. But thank you very much for watching. And before we sign off as well, let us know where we've gone right and where we've gone wrong, because we enjoy reading your comments if we ever get any. So thank you very much. We've enjoyed this one. See you next time.
Bye.